Hi guys, Anya's here. Today I have a very special, we have two Anyas here today. I have a very special friend, Anya Kaats here. I have a chance to interview her and I'm super excited. I couldn't sleep last night how excited I was to ask her all the questions that I had for a few years now, I would say. Thank you for taking time, Anya.
Yeah.
Welcome here. So Anya is a blogger. Anya is a health coach and nutrition coach, and she's a marketing expert who worked with smaller brands for cleaner, healthier foods in the past. And she's also, I can't even call you that, but I call you this secretly. I call you a modern thinker. That's what I've been noticing lately, this transformation you've been going through. And also Ani is an amazing photographer, and I hope you never quit that job because you're super talented at this. I absolutely love your work. And if you guys never seen her work, if you're not familiar with Anya, you can go to her Instagram and just look, scroll forever. Anya, welcome here. I'm so happy to have you here. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm so good. I feel like I don't think I've ever had a full-on conversation with someone else named Anya. So
Really?
that in and of itself is pretty exciting for me. Yeah.
We're also spelled the same way. Our names are spelled the same way, which usually is rare.
I know.
Right?
I know. Very
So,
cool.
some of my readers may not know you. Some of them do because I think I referred to you in the past. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your background because I'd rather hear the story from you than give a summary of your life, right? It's always better.
Yeah, sure. So where to begin? I guess professionally, at least, I definitely did not plan to go into the career that I did. I went to school for gender and sexuality, actually, and sort of writing as well, and planned on going to grad school. And then in between graduating from college and going to grad school, I got a job at Whole Foods. And honestly, the reason I got a job at Whole Foods was just because I wanted the discount from the employee discount. It's a true story. So I got like a part-time job in the deli department. And in literally a matter of 3 weeks was promoted to the demo specialist in the store after interviewing totally on a whim. And then shortly thereafter, my boss, so the marketing team leader of the store, left. And so I sort of unofficially assumed her position. And basically just like thought to myself, you know what, I'm making money. I don't have any formal nutrition background. I'd been eating sort of like a paleo diet for a little while, but I had no formal nutrition background. I didn't have any cooking background, but I thought, here I am with a full-time job. I'm doing something I really like and I'm making money. I don't really know if I want to go back to school. And so I met someone through my job at Whole Foods, someone that had just started a brand called Brad's Raw Foods. And I think I held 3 or 4 different positions at Whole Foods within the course of a year. It was sort of crazy, but then left to start a demo team in the Northeast. That was all I was going to do for this brand. And that soon pretty much turned into me running, or at least helping to run, the marketing department of that brand. And we sort of grew from, a brand making kale chips in a garage to, a $20 million business in the course of a few years. So I got a very intense crash course in startups and marketing and branding, and things sort of just took off from there. I got a job in San Diego with a brand called Mama Chia, moved out there, did marketing for them. Very shortly thereafter was recruited by Suja Juice, also in San Diego, and worked for them for a couple of years. And then Suja was, Coca-Cola bought 30% of Suja a few years ago now. I cannot believe it was like 3 years ago. And I never considered myself a marketer. I actually sort of hate marketing. I think marketing is sort of like lying to people, which I have just no interest in doing. So for me, like, marketing was always about like telling stories of brands, right? So these sort of small natural product startups, it was a completely different thing than marketing for a big corporation. So I really had no interest in like moving up through the ranks of Coca-Cola, and I decided with the skill set that I'd gathered over the however many years I'd been working at brands, that I was just going to start my own thing. So over the past 3 years, that sort of morphed into doing a lot of content development. So photography, as you mentioned, some written content as well. But I have multiple clients at any given time, and I work with them on their content strategy and then produce content for them. Sort of the reason being that a lot of brands are hesitant to hire someone in-house to do something like that because they have a lot of other priorities. And so they are sort of left with some pretty crappy options in terms of like hiring a photography studio for like 10 grand, but then only getting like a small amount of photos and not being able to use those, or working with bloggers to do sponsored posts and sponsored content. But the problem with that is that when you have a brand, especially a small one, you really need to get your branding right. So you need to have your own content. You need to have things in your own look and feel. And this was something that I knew from working in-house at brands. So I said, you know what? I know a lot of brands need this, so I'm going to offer that. So that's what I did. I had, at the same time that I was doing that, I did have a food blog, I guess you could say, health and wellness blog, that focused mostly in sort of paleo, whole food type stuff, just because that's how I'd been eating for the past forever. And then, I don't know, I guess I started to feel, this sort of happened before my life blew up, but I started starting to feel like there was something kind of missing. I felt a little bit like my blog was not necessarily inauthentic, but just a very small, it just felt like a very small piece of me. I felt like there was so much more of me that I wanted to share publicly, and I wasn't really sure how to fit that in. I had a lot of super like controversial opinions about things. And I was just portraying someone online that didn't feel like myself. And that, I think, started to really wear on me. And then the beginning of 2017, I went through a whole bunch of personal life insanity, which you're welcome to ask me about. I won't totally elaborate, but it basically led me to decide that I didn't want to do my blog anymore. I'm still actively doing content for brands and working with brands. But I decided to start a podcast that's going to be out soon. It's called A Millennial's Guide to Saving the World.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
Yeah, and basically, I just want to talk about things that people don't talk about. So definitely people who follow me on Instagram, since I've sort of switched over from just doing kind of food blogger stuff, have definitely know that I post a lot of sort of unconventional, controversial stuff. And not just about, I think a lot of people will make a comment about how, social media sort of portrays this like very curated, positive thing. And I think like positivity isn't even my qualm. Like positivity isn't even what I'm going after in terms of why social media is fake. What I feel social media is missing is authenticity and vulnerability. And I see authenticity and vulnerability as things that are like really scary to talk about, things that you don't know what the reaction you're going to get is, right? So if you just kind of post something like, I had a really bad day today, like I struggle like everyone else, like you're guaranteed to get a ton of positive feedback, right? Like that's not scary to post. Posting about your bad day, no. But, posting about personal details about your life and, past traumas that you've endured or just weird things that you identify with. I think that's really missing from discourse in general. And so my podcast is really going to be aimed at covering a lot of those topics and talking to sort of like experts in different fields where, all having to do with like things that I truly think would be responsible for saving the world. So anything from like regenerative agriculture to like using psychedelics for addressing anxiety and stress and PTSD to talking about past grief and trauma to talking about the prison industrial complex. I mean, anything that talking about sexuality and relationships, just things that I think need to be talked about more. And I see a lot of people older than me talking about these things. I listen personally to a lot of podcasts. I don't entirely see a lot of people in my generation doing so. Maybe I'm just missing it, but I don't see it. So especially women. So yeah. I guess that.
Sorry.
No. I was just gonna say. I guess that sort of summarizes it. I'm totally like all over the place with stuff, and I'm good with that. So.
Well, wow, quite a journey. I think just going through all the stages that you just described, you personally went through, and I'm pretty sure you're not alone, right? So going from would you consider that, I want to summarize it, put a cap on it, so don't correct me if I'm wrong, would you summarize it from finding your health into opening other dimensions of you, not just for your business, but for your life and for your mission? That's how it seems to me, like almost you're tapping into those things, and then of course major shift happened for you, or probably few major shifts, and then how did this transformation happen? Did you like working with brands and doing what you were doing, or were you in constant search of something else? And what would you call yourself now?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea. I guess, I was really, the way that I sort of approached working with brands in the natural product space was that what sort of kept me going, I think I wouldn't have survived very long, but what kept me going was really the industry as a whole. So I knew that supporting the natural products industry in general in an effort to change the food system in this country and support brands, I always call them like what I believe to be the brands of the future. So supporting these brands that I think are going to become mainstream, that was always where my true passion lied. So whether I was like doing marketing or content or organizing a trade show for, the brand, it was less about that and more about, I just want to have some small part in this larger picture. So the larger picture was always what, kept me going, but I think food and nutrition is just a very small piece of, first of all, what's going to change the world, and second of all, what brings us health and happiness. I think it's just a tiny percentage. So I went through a ton of life transitions at the beginning of last year, and I don't know, through that really dark time in my life, decided that I wasn't comfortable only doing this little small piece with brands. I really wanted to explore more, and there were so many things just about myself personally that I wanted to explore. And the shift was, I wouldn't say it was completely sudden, because I definitely had some doubts and some sort of like questions before, but it really did take, my life totally blew up. And I went through a lot of really difficult transitions and had to make a lot of difficult choices, and struggled immensely with my health. And what it really led me to see was that, you can't out supplement or like out diet yourself into health. It's, if you're not happy and you don't know how, you're not managing your stress, or you're anxious, or you're dealing with a ton of toxic relationships, there's no supplement that you can take. There's no diet that you can put yourself on that's going to make you better, right? So in sort of doing this for myself and trying to sort of reclaim my own health, I just thought, I don't want to get on the internet anymore and just talk about like, here's a recipe, or here's some supplements, or here's some skincare products for you, because that was, it felt inauthentic, because it was only a small piece. So, and so when I came to this realization that I thought, I think that the real key to everything is, being our authentic and vulnerable selves. And I think everyone is sort of walking around playing a game or playing a role to some extent. And I thought, there's no way that I'm going to sit there and, blog about this if I'm not practicing what I preach. So I just thought, you know what, screw it. Like I'm just going to do that. So yeah, I'm still actively working for brands because I need to make money, but also because I do enjoy it. And it's funny that this guy, Brad, who started Brad's Raw Foods, is actually launching a new brand that I think I'm going to get involved with a little bit, probably a little more intensely than I have any of my other clients. But I still love the industry. It's like my little family. So I don't plan on getting out of that necessarily, but I do, the blog is not going to continue. It's sort of going to be replaced by my podcast. So.
Okay. That's definitely quite transformation, I would say. But I feel like you have those passions that keep guiding you through in whatever life. If you want to talk about it, if you don't mind, of course, kind of taking us through the time where you had a hard time with your health with the transition. What helped you? What pushed you? You can go as much detail as you want. I'm not going to be putting limits on you there. What pushed you through the hard time? Because sometimes we all have those years in life. For some people, it's quite a few years. For some people, like I personally had a very rough year. I lost my best friend to cancer last year. So I went through stuff I never thought I would be capable of through going, right? And not to ruin your parade, but that's how do you go through this? How did you go through what I know you went through, and how did you come up with all those ideas? What helped you? What pushed you through? What was the hardest part to deal with?
Good question. So I was in a relationship for, I guess, about 6 years. It was a bit tumultuous, but we bought a house, we renovated a house, we got married. This was, I guess, May of 2016. Was it? May of 2016, yeah. And in December of 2016, I kind of had an awakening of sorts, where I realized I wasn't happy and my relationship was not what I wanted, and I didn't feel like myself. And these weren't new thoughts necessarily. I had certainly had these thoughts before, but I sort of just thought, well, like life can't be perfect. I can't have everything, this is like good enough. But I never felt like totally thrilled. And I left that relationship pretty suddenly. And according to my ex-husband, for him, it was quite shocking and quite sudden, which I understand. And I was completely naive about what a divorce entailed and how easy I thought that would be. So we had this house, and he was not, over the years, we had both originally lived in New York and New Jersey and moved out to California, and all his friends and family were back on the East Coast. So I fully expected that when this happened, that he would just say like, all right, this sucks, but like, I'm going to move back east. You keep the house, the end, right? I had all these expectations of how it's going to go down. Anyway, that is not how it went down. He did not want to give up the house, and we had renovated it in large part to be appropriate for my business because I worked at home. So when that was really the first step of me kind of being like, shit, what am I going to do? And so I decided, or was kind of told, my mother at the time lived in, or still does, lives in Santa Monica. And she told me, well, why don't you just move in here and temporarily while this all gets sorted out. So at least, because I was living in my house with my ex-husband and we were in different rooms, it was just a really stressful situation. So I moved in with my mom thinking that would solve the problem, at least temporarily. And simultaneous to doing that, I was still struggling with some health issues and decided to do this like very intense gut detox and like parasite detox and all this stuff. Anyway, I got so sick, which I think looking back was mostly a result of my emotional state more than anything else. But it was just like a perfect storm of everything at the same time. And I got extremely ill, like bedridden ill. And I had also always sort of had a little bit of a challenging relationship with my mother. But when I moved in with her, I thought, well, I'm just going to be living my own life and doing my own thing. And I have like friends and stuff in LA. And when it turned into me being like in a hospital bed in her house, having to like have her really take care of me, basically like all of my childhood trauma like was written or just like shown to me in plain sight as an adult. So my mom has undiagnosed borderline personality disorder, which is a very, I don't even want to say misunderstood, because I feel like no one even knows what it is or that it exists. But it's characterized by someone who has sort of real or imagined fears of abandonment, and therefore is extremely codependent in relationships, merged with people, really doesn't have their own identity. So if there's something that I want to do that she doesn't totally feel like she would do, I'm, not supported. As a kid, I was constantly made to feel guilty for not doing things for her. I had I hope I'm super transparent, so I hope this isn't like too much for people, but like she ripped up my brother and my Mother's Day cards a couple times, like telling us it wasn't enough. And so I'm living in her house, right? And I'm now an adult, so I can understand things in a way that I couldn't as a child. And so I would be crying, and she'd be telling me like, this isn't normal. Like, this isn't natural. You need to like go on medication. No one suffers like this. So here at a time when I needed the most support ever from the person that I thought would be the one person that could give it to me, I felt it was the opposite of that. And so I was simultaneously dealing with the shit with my mom, not knowing where at this point I was going to live. I was extremely sick. I had met someone like romantically in the months prior who I decided I had to basically walk away from because I could not drag them through the nightmare of my life. Not to mention, I'd never really been single in my adult life. I've always been in relationships. So I had to kind of say goodbye to them. This is someone that I really cared deeply about and really wanted to be with. And so I didn't know. I thought, okay, well, this could mean I'll never see them again because I'm walking away from them. So I dealt with all of that from about beginning of February of last year to mid-May, and finally found a place where I am now, although it's disgustingly messy, in Topanga, California. And I guess in terms of like how I made all the realizations that I made, I very early on, especially in response to my mother telling me like, this isn't normal and this isn't natural, there was something deep down that told me that I was supposed to be where I was. That I think for a good month maybe, I was like, this is terrible, this is not supposed to happen, like I want to just go back, like take me back. And then at a certain point, without any context really, I really decided I think I'm supposed to be here. I think there are lessons to be learned. And once I made that, or once I had that thought, I guess, things just sort of started appearing, right? So it was like, okay, I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to learn lessons. Basically, then I just kind of was like, what are the lessons? Like, if there are lessons to be learned, like, tell me now, because I'm sitting here so miserable. And so I think I guess the first thing that fell into my lap was astrology. And I had no idea about really astrology at all. But I had spoken, my best friend had a woman who was a family friend, and she was sort of like an intuitive type of person. And I got on the phone with her because I just thought like, I need to talk to someone. Got on the phone with her for an hour, and she mentioned something about a Saturn return, which I had no clue what that was. But she was like, oh yeah, this is your Saturn return. So I got off the phone with her and I just Googled what the hell that was. And it was described as like this awful, for most people, a very challenging awakening time in a lot of young people's life, approximately between the ages of like 27 and 31. And the more I read about it, the more accurate it seemed. And I thought, all right, well, maybe I should get an astrology reading. So I did that, and I was just completely blown away about the accuracy, and realizing that like astrology was so much more than like your silly sun sign, that's just a tiny portion of it. And I don't know, that just got me going. I was in got myself into a lot of therapy. I started reading a lot of books, mainly about grief and trauma. and feeling, I mean, it's so hard, right? Because like I talked to so many people, and I was in this boat too, where I was like aware, like, oh yeah, like shit was kind of messed up in my past, and my mom was kind of crazy, but I was fine, and I survived, and here I am, right? So I had an awareness of it. But what I didn't have was I don't think anybody understands, not anybody, I think a lot of people misunderstand what it means to like face your past trauma. What that normally means is that as a child, whenever this trauma occurred, you did everything in your power to just get through it, right? So like if you're being abused as a kid, you don't have the understanding that your parent is doing anything other than protecting you. You don't have that. So you normalize it and you naturalize it, which means that you don't feel anything. You just kind of go through the motions. You don't feel you have a right to feel anything because you just think this is normal. So what I learned, and through a lot of reading, is that, facing this trauma is basically like feeling all the feelings that you didn't feel back then.
That's heartbreaking for many, and very challenging. I can see that.
Yeah.
You're an adult and you have all this experience that you went through life with, experienced so many things. Well, you child, you don't. You have joy and you have toys and you have rules, right?
Right.
And once you're an adult, how was it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was horrifying. I mean, I have never felt that kind of pain before. And I mean, it sounds very like esoteric and spiritual, and it really is, but I really just through this dark time. And because I believe, right? Because I think, and I've read a lot too, it's like when you don't believe there's a purpose, when you don't believe there's anything to learn, that's where you have things like depression, which is like just a stagnant place, right? You're not feeling anything. And what I learned is that in order to, you always hear that thing about like, you can't have love without grief, right? Or they're both the same thing, and happiness and sadness, they both go hand in hand. And I understood that conceptually, but I lived through a crazy transformative experience where I literally, through experiencing pain, I just like, I felt like messages were like coming down from wherever, like helping me figure out the whole meaning of life, which I know sounds weird, but that's really what it was, just in terms of like the purpose of why I'm here. And I was really willing to go down this path and to, I had nothing. I mean, I just thought like, I don't care about anything anymore. I just want to be healthy again, and please like lead me through whatever I need to be led through in order to get there. And so I went on a mission to sort of like find meaning in my life and my life's experiences, which touched upon so many different things, but it's not something that I can sort of logically explain other than, I mean, through really walking head first into pain and trauma and accepting and feeling pain. I mean, what I needed to do was just, it almost like just fell into my lap. It became very clear. I didn't need to do a lot other than cry.
Right? You have to just almost like accept the next step that is in front of you. And it's amazing because I feel like, I get like goosebumps because thinking about how many women, besides from you and I just talking right now, how many women have similar experiences or about to have similar experiences, right? So we don't get a chance to have those experiences, and then we just go through motions in life, whether it's divorce, whether it's kids or business, whatever we do. Most of my audience are women, and they start, and I'll share this with you, they start as a nutrition coach. Obviously, we start with nutrition. But then we get into the patterns of sugar addiction, emotional eating, and we started to dive in. And that's why I recently started switching more into mindset, because I feel like I don't even want to get into nutrition part or fitness part before we dive into those things. And Anya, the floodgate got open, and every client I have right now, we just go through this almost like a cleansing thing. And I know I'm not a professional. I don't have a right to tap into those fields of their life, right? I allow them to choose, and some people go to therapy right away. And I admire that, because you need help, right? Because those things are not related. There's nothing to do with food, nutrition, and overall health. They usually so much deeper and so much more rooted in those past experiences we had. And personally, I was bullied for years as a child, and my mom found out when I was 30 years old, and there was another floodgate that got open for me to go through things again. And when you absolutely agree with you, when you're a child, you don't even think about those things. You just go, you just do it. Shut down, maybe. I was a weird child, and I'm sure you probably can relate. I'm still weird as an adult, and I was gonna ask you this question to just like make it not so serious for a moment. We'll get back to serious stuff because I love it. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how weird you would consider yourself?
Oh my God, can I go above 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean 100. Oh yeah, I have felt like an alien.
Yeah.
For a very long time since I was a kid. Extremely misunderstood, and I actually think that's what started everything, right? So I went to school for gender and sexuality. I had all these really strange beliefs, like my dad is gay. I just sort of grew up in a very like open-minded, progressive sort of household. People, especially as a woman, men were extremely threatened by my beliefs or opinions about sex and relationships. And I just encountered so much judgment that I thought, all right, well, I guess I'm kind of have these beliefs and this is who I am, but I don't necessarily need to like live that life. I don't necessarily need to, I can say things like, I think monogamy is a choice, but I'm just going to still be in this monogamous relationship. I can have these thoughts and these feelings without necessarily living them out, if that makes sense. And that got me into a lot of trouble because I was then in a relationship. I remember my ex-husband would literally say things to me at the end of our relationship, like, I feel like you're not the same person you were when I met you. And like, he wasn't wrong. Like I wasn't, I just pretended to be like whatever the hell he wanted me to be because I was so sick of being myself and being so shut down that I just decided it'd be easier to just stop being myself. And then it blew up, right? So then I realized, that was a whole bunch of crap, and had to get out of that. But yeah, I agree. I think, and one of my missions with the podcast, we talk about words like trauma, and people think that trauma is like severe physical or sexual abuse, right? Like that's what you think of when you think of trauma, but that's not what trauma is. Trauma is much more broad. There is literally no person in this world that has not experienced some form of trauma. Like divorce is a trauma. And if you don't experience trauma in your childhood, you can experience it later in life. Someone, your partner dies, or you go and fight in a war, or, even as a child, your teacher tells you you're a terrible singer and you feel like you can never sing again in your life, right? These are all traumatic events. And I really want to destigmatize trauma because I agree with you. I think there is not one person that hasn't suffered from some sort of trauma, and that trauma is influencing us in a myriad of ways. And things like overeating or health problems or addictions. I mean, what's his name? Russell Brand talks all about this, right? A lot of people do, but he just comes to mind. But that these are just symptoms. These are not the problem. We have to deal with the problem, which a lot of the time is trauma. And I think what happens is that trauma leads to a bunch of people that shut down their authenticity, right? So whatever that trauma was, it has led them to believe that they need to kind of hide and that they aren't good enough. And there's a lack of self-love. And we think that we can just sort of get self-love and get confidence and fix all our problems without dealing with the source of it, because we don't think it was that serious. Or, oh, well, I went on like a lot of vacations as a kid too. And like, I went to summer camp and like had a roof over my head. Like on the surface, on paper, I lived like a picture perfect, like amazing privileged life. Right. But that is not what matters. So, yeah, I think that's really what I want to do. And I think what I sort of love and get a kick out of is like how uncomfortable I make people, because everyone is so concerned. Like nobody wants to admit that they are suffering from this at all. Nobody wants to admit they don't have self-love. Nobody wants to admit that they're acting inauthentically. Nobody wants to admit that they don't think they're the shit, you know? I would have lied straight through my teeth prior to a year ago. Oh yeah, I love myself. I'm like the best. I'm the most amazing. But it was complete crap. And the defensiveness to me is just more evidence that, you know,
there's something there, right?
Yeah. So anyway, that's, I've definitely learned through this. Like I have an immense appreciation for owning up to my own bullshit. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I do that I'm not super proud of. That's as a result of my upbringing and my programming. And not to say that I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you know, sometimes I'd be like complaining to my dad, who's one of the most amazing people. I would say something like, oh, so-and-so is doing this and they're doing this and I don't like it and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, he would just say like, are you sure this is really about them and not about you? And I was like, nope, you're right. Like totally, this is like my own projection, my own crap, right? Like I can't change anyone else. So that's the kind of stuff I love. But yeah, it's everything. I do think it affects all of us. So,
thanks, and I absolutely agree with you in terms of what we actually share right now, considering we're consistently scrolling through and, you know, blasting all this information about us and our life and every single moment of our life. That's why I messaged you a few months back when you kind of got back to social media and started being more active. I was just shocked how you're raw and you're authentic and you're not afraid to say what you think. And many people are so scared. I live in the South currently. I lived in California. It was a little easier. In the South, it's frowned upon. You don't really want to speak the truth, and it's hard. And I'm not judging. I'm owning to it because I don't like it. I don't like it here. So I'm gonna move back to where I feel good, right? But it's not about that. I think we're not talking about the things that are actually important. That's what terrifies me. We're not talking. It doesn't matter nutrition or self-worth, self-love, and authenticity. It's all about, you know, how those things get disclosed to us. Like low-fat diets are bad for you, and it comes decades later when someone started talking about it. It becomes bigger, right? So right now we're not focusing on it. We're focusing on judging politicians and sharing our beliefs on Facebook that are very, I would say, we're sharing it like very, very little. We're never diving into it. We're scared to talk about finances. We're scared to talk about beliefs. If I ever start asking people, I usually do it in person, because on Facebook or anywhere else on social media, it's almost impossible to get it out of people. They're looking and they're thinking, what is this person going to think about me, right? Instead of saying, this is what I think self-love is, or I was abused and this is how I feel about this issue, right? Or we have addiction, or we have obesity in our society because of this. So I think it's just so important that you're bringing up this depth of the subject. And I think it's an amazing path. I can see you doing really, really big, creating a revolution in this respect, because you're the forefront. Not many people do this right now. It's scary. And you're a girl doing that because it resonates. I'm sure you have people messaging you all the time and saying, this is resonating with me so much. This touched me. This made me, your post made me cry. Seriously. When I read your post, I cried a lot a few months ago, but in a good way. You know, when
crying is good. Crying is good.
our personality comes through. That's all, the bullshit goes away, and we just authentic and we're true to ourselves. That's what I really admire. Where do you see this is going? What is this? I know, that's a trick question.
Yeah, I mean, I've always sort of approached, I cannot say this, it's so funny because I cannot say this about like any relationship I've been in my life, but in terms of professional stuff, I've always really approached it in a very like, let's see where this leads kind of a way. I've never really had a plan, and I still don't. What I do know is that like this podcast for me is just the first step into something, right? I feel I have pretty much zero community, that I feel, you know, I have a couple of close friends, but especially in terms of where I live locally, I don't have a community. And so one of my biggest priorities with the podcast is like to selfishly sort of develop a community for myself. And I really want to do a lot of interviews in person so I can really like talk to people face to face. And, but I don't know. I guess what I feel is that, not that it's easy for me, but for whatever reason, I do have the bravery and courage, I suppose, to say things that I know a lot of people want to say but are too scared to say. And you're right. I get messages from people all day, every day, thanking me for saying things that they were too afraid to say, or for giving them the strength to do something similar. And so that is my goal, I suppose, to show people that it's okay to be different. It's okay to be kind of fucked up. It's okay to be a weirdo. It's okay to go through bad times. And I think that, you know, I think vulnerability breeds vulnerability. So I think the more of us that are authentic and vulnerable, it will teach others to do the same. So I don't know where this is going, but I often think about one of the first, you know, the show Girls on HBO. I often think about, actually, it's so funny. I went to summer camp, sleepaway camp with Lena Dunham. I just was watching a bunch of home movies the other day, and I was like, wow, I have footage of Lena Dunham at summer camp. This is funny. But anyway, at the beginning, I guess the first episode pilot of that show, she said something like, oh, I don't know if I'm the voice of my generation, but I just feel like a voice of a generation. And that's so how I feel. I was like, I don't know what this is or who I am. I just feel like a voice. I'm like, that's good enough for me. So I would love to create a movement. I mean, I think we need to change a lot of things about our society. My goal has always been to sort of like opt out of systems that I find to be oppressive or antithetical to saving the world and the planet. And so I would love to develop some sort of movement, especially with people my age, that are just not afraid to do something different, right? Like just the fact that I like live in Topanga and like have like I'm like holding a crystal right now, and like I like light incense and like pull tarot cards and talk about, you know, random crap, because I know in the past when I was living my like fake life that I would know people that were doing things that I always wanted to do, right? And I'd be like, I always would say to myself, you know, I feel like I'm just like meant to be a hippie, or like I feel like I'm a club, or I feel like I'm just like gonna be a hippie one day, right? And I really respected and admired the people that were just sort of like weirdos and living their truth, and thank goodness that they were around, because if they weren't, I don't know what options I would have thought I had. So I just want to be one of those people. If I can help one person live a more authentic life, then that's great. But I think we need to change the world, and I think we need to do it fast. And I know that's a big pill to swallow. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. But I just want to maybe have some small part in that. So
yeah, but also you're talking about how you went through this transformation. I was listening to carefully, and I also thought about, like, for some reason I was picturing, I'm a very visual person, so I was picturing you standing in front of a mirror and like basically telling yourself, you know, that's not who you are, and discovering this in stages and layers, and then seeing yourself in the mirror. I'm pretty sure when you look in the mirror right now, you're seeing a different person than you were 2 years ago when you're going through turbulent times, right? So I think this is what it's important to, we're so out of touch with our bodies, with our mind, with our emotional connection, with our spiritual connection, with who we are. Honestly, we're too busy doing all this busy work, right? And to random things and the almost fake things that don't really matter. And I think you're going to help so many women to discover this connection. And actually, my next question is about this. Do you have any suggestions, any advice, how, as a woman, you can get in touch with your emotional, spiritual, physical body in a better shape or form? And how can you get closer to yourself, if I can say that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you need, first and foremost, a willingness to do so, right? I think you really need to have a heavy dose of humility to say, I think I could be better, or, I think I can grow. I think just that. I think that's where we get stuck. I think we have it all figured out, or it's just the food. And if I just eat this, it's going to be better. And if I just take this supplement, it's going to be better. If I just go through the motions of whatever it is, it's going to be better. So I would say first and foremost is a willingness to change, which means a willingness to admit that maybe you don't love yourself as much as you could, a willingness to admit that maybe you are involved in multiple toxic relationships. And these could be people you love dearly. I mean, one of the things, I stopped speaking to my mother after this experience this year, which was something I'd been contemplating doing for well over a decade. But I was afraid. I was afraid to tell her. I knew if I said we have to stop talking, she'd say why, and I'd have to explain, and I didn't know how to explain it, right? So, and I didn't want to hurt her, and that was the whole dynamic of our relationship. So when I say willingness, I don't mean it's going to be like rainbows and unicorns and fairies. I mean, it's like you are trudging through a mountain of shit. And this means, you can have realizations about your marriage. You could have realizations about your parents. You could have realizations about the dynamic of your close friendships. So that, I think, a willingness to change, and change is only something, there's this graphic that I love so much. There's a guy standing up on stage and there's an audience full of people, and the guy says, "Who wants change?" And everybody raises their hand. And then the next image is him saying, "Okay, who wants to change?" And nobody raises their hand, right? There's this concept that what drives me insane is when people just start complaining about things. I mean, this is anything from, we can talk about race in this context, we can talk about, sexual orientation in this context, but things like, oh, they don't treat us right, or, they're the bad ones, or, in the Me Too movement, for instance, like men are the enemies, that's all fine. But like it's a cardinal rule. You cannot change anyone or anything but yourself. So if you want change in your life, you have to change personally. And that's a really hard pill for people to swallow, because they think that by accepting that they need to change, that somehow they are to blame for the situation, which just could not be farther from the truth at all, right? So there's a lot of stuff that happened to us that is not our fault, that we are not responsible for, but we are responsible for the decisions we make about how we're going to deal with those issues. And so I feel like I'm repeating myself, but yeah, a willingness to change would be my number one thing. A willingness to stop pointing fingers. I could sit here all day long. Well, it's my mom's fault, and it's my ex-husband's fault, and it's the fault of this. Where would that take me? That would take me nowhere. So it's got to be, okay, all these people did these crappy things to me, and I've done a lot of crappy things, and how can I make this better? And how can I accept responsibility for my own life? So I would say doing that. I think once you do that, at least in my experience, if you really are willing to have that perspective, then I do think that things start to fall in your lap. And whether that's, I think spirituality is incredibly important. It was for me. At one point I was just like, I've got nothing, but if I can just live in nature by myself and like have the love that I feel is like coming from the planet and the land, then like that is sufficient. I mean, I really got to a point where I thought, all right, well, worst comes to worst, I'll just live out in nature by myself. And like, that would be okay. So I think whatever it is, for me, I have an incredible connection to the earth. And so I spent a lot of time traveling by myself and camping and spending time outdoors and gardening and growing food. That was really therapeutic for me. I dove into astrology. That was really helpful. I read a lot of books about grief. That was extremely helpful. So some people might want to meditate or do a lot of yoga, or whatever it is that speaks to you, just follow that. But I don't think any of those modalities are going to help you whatsoever if you don't come into it with an incredible amount of humility and a willingness to change. So
I think so. I think you're right, because it also comes in, and those incredible tips, absolutely love them. And I think it's going to be, in my mind, it's going to be a little different for everyone, but those are the first steps to take, right? For some people, it's going to be, like you mentioned, getting outside and doing those things. But I think I would summarize what you describe as a self-care. And actually, I had this question for you. What is your self-care routine like? What do you, because I feel personally, when I went through all the difficult times, of course, for a time you go through just a period of pain where you're just in pain and there are no painkillers for that pain, right? You just deal with it, you live it, and you either sob unstoppably and deal with it, or you write, or you work through certain things. Like you said, you had a therapist to help you. But what do you, what helped me personally to go through difficult times and deal with trauma, deal with things that still relate to my health right now, emotional, physical, nutrition-wise, fitness-wise, doesn't matter what dimension. It helped me to actually establish a self-care routine, almost a weekly, monthly, daily. Sometimes it's small things, sometimes it's bigger things. Like meditation was huge for me, and reading, diving into books to the point where you research your own, you become your own therapist in a way. So that helped me personally. And I would like to hear, what are your favorite routines, and maybe some of them will help my readers too.
Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, like, I could do so much better. It was very challenging, and still is challenging, especially when I feel anxious or just like emotionally unwell or physically unwell. I think it can be very difficult to take care of myself. I just feel like I want to do yoga when I feel healthy. It's like hard for me to do a practice like that when I feel awful. And so I think just listening to your intuition, I remember back when things were so bad and I didn't know what to do, and like I didn't know how to work out, I thought, well, I could dance. That sounds really good. So I'm going to just dance. I'm not a dancer by any stretch of the imagination, but I would just turn on music and dance because that felt like what my body wanted to do, right? I wanted to travel by myself. As scary as that was, I wanted to do that and go camping. And so that's what I did. So I think the self-care, what kind of bothers me a little bit with self-care sometimes is that there's like this, you don't want it to stress you out more, right? So you don't want to have a daily workout routine, but then you don't work out and you're just so mad at yourself because you didn't work out, and what's the point of that? So I really try and make my self-care intuitive, which is, it's a careful balance, right? Because if it's totally intuitive, sometimes like, I just want to do nothing, which I think is sometimes fine, but I think sometimes you do have to push yourself. So I would say for me, I guess the number one thing that I do now is have a spiritual practice. So I will often wake up in the morning and light some sage and put on some music that I like, and like pull a tarot card for the day. I definitely always, I make, especially recently, I've been juicing. So I have some fresh juice before I put anything else in my body. I walk around my neighborhood very frequently, work out. But I think one of the biggest things that I've really loved that I've integrated into my life over the past year is taking time twice a month, so on new and full moons, to do a little sort of ceremony for myself. So I turn off all my lights and I light a bunch of candles and I put all my crystals around, and I take out a journal. And depending on, for me, I'm very into astrology. So depending on whatever the new or full moon is about, what it, what sign it's in and what it symbolizes, I sort of ask for guidance around intentions and, what should I be focusing on over the next, couple weeks or a month. And I pull tarot cards, I meditate on it, I journal, and it doesn't really matter what it is. For me, it's the space where I turn my phone off and I'm just like completely focused on my own emotional well-being. And having, I think that's what's so important about spirituality for me, is to just say, like, I don't have these answers. I need to be given some sort of guidance or information. I definitely would spend so long being like, I'm going to figure this out on my own. And I have all this stuff in my head. And it really wasn't until I'm like, I don't know anything, so help me out, please. Once I sort of allowed that into my life, it became incredibly therapeutic for me. So, and I would say, honestly, on a daily basis, the biggest thing I feel like I do in regard to self-care is setting boundaries with people. So I never said no to things. I would do anything anybody wanted. I would engage in every argument. I would want to prove myself to someone in every situation. I never wanted someone to be mad at me. I didn't want anyone to be upset about me. I hate conflict. And what that meant was that I was just giving and giving and giving and giving, and I wasn't getting anything back. So it's become incredibly important for me to really say, like, if something comes across my plate, why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Even as far as like what I'm eating every day, to who I'm communicating with, to who I'm seeing and when, I always ask myself, why are you doing this? Where is it coming from? Is it an authentic desire, or is it something you feel you should do, which has got to be my most hated word, is should. So yeah, setting boundaries just around myself and being like, this is what's authentic to me. This is how I'm going to take care of myself. If that makes you upset, so be it, It's a pretty revolutionary thing to do. I think we live in this culture where we see people going out of their way to help other people, and it's written off as like, oh, they're so kind, or oh, it's good karma. It's like, it's the opposite of that. It is the opposite of self-love. The people in my life with the best boundaries are the most happy, and they are the people that in the past I'd probably call them assholes, because they're selfless, right? They're selfish. And their own happiness and their own life is their number one priority. And it's hard, and I've learned an incredible amount from people that have good boundaries and who have an immense amount of self-love. And yeah, I've pissed a lot of people off in the past year, and I've walked away from a lot, and I've said I'm not going to tolerate certain things, but my God, it just feels great. So
I think it's liberating, because once you stop, one of the dimensions of it is people pleasing, I think, right? We're taught to smile and say, I'm okay, and make sure everybody's okay around you, not to impose on anyone, right? But the whole piece is the mindfulness around your own space and time and what's really important. And to me, it was honestly, sometimes it's as simple as not taking your phone in your hand first thing you wake up in the morning and just enjoying your beverage, whatever that is. Juice, for me, it's coffee. And just people are so uncomfortable with silence, and so facing themselves, right? we can't stand it. It's so out of our comfort zone. And honestly, I actually in the past I hired a business coach who helped me to break through certain things and discover this whole, I didn't know about it. I thought it was successful and it was good and it was positive. I found a lot of things about me I did not know about at all, right? So to me, it's a must always to be balanced, to be centered, to be comfortable, to be happy. You can't really be happy with suppressing all those things. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Doesn't make sense in the long run. It might be okay for a while, but I have a feeling almost all the women have this point in life. They might not dive into the depth of the very, very bottom of it, what's the underlying issue, but they have this moment in their life when they're not satisfied with the mask they have on, or the status or the posture that they carry and show. But I think it's absolutely important. And my last question, I would talk to you for ages. I have so many questions for you. I want to ask you about, what are you reading? I have people who read a lot and would love to
what are you reading?
Good question. Things in the last year or two you read.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh my gosh. I mean, I could say so much. One of my favorites was Brene Brown's new book, Braving the Wilderness.
Okay.
It's all about vulnerability and authenticity. That was a really good one. What else? I'm just like looking at my bookshelf right now. I guess, I mean, it depends what topic we're talking of here. Louise Hay has a book called You Can Heal Your Life, which is all about how basically a lack of self-love is the root of all health and emotional issues, which I probably would agree with.
That's the book that helped me heal. I don't mean to interrupt you. That's the book that's my journey personally, because it's life-changing, I think.
Totally. One amazing, I have two books about grief. The first one would be The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Frances Weller. That was incredible. Just about how the West has completely lost touch with the importance of grief and ceremony around grief. And then another one about grief, Martin Prechtel, I think it's called The Smell of Rain on Dust. Mm-hmm. That was another good one. What?
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, go for it. And if anybody's interested in astrology, The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest is a really good initial resource. What else? If anyone's interested in sexuality and relationships, there's a book called Sex at Dawn by Chris Ryan, looking at monogamy and sexuality from a sort of historical and cross-cultural perspective. That is one of my favorites. But yeah, I would say those are, hold on, let's see. Am I missing anything? When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate. It's all about stress and trauma and how it, again, manifests physically. So
most of us need to read for sure.
Yep. Yeah.
That's amazing. Anya, I would ask you a million questions, honestly.
Well, maybe we'll just have to do it again. We'll have to do a part 2.
Where can we find you? So I know that you're launching the podcast. You're in the process of launching probably a new website or some sort of web presence besides from Instagram.
Yeah. So yeah, the website is not launched yet. So I'd say the best place to find me is on Instagram, which is just my name, ANYA.KAATS, Anya Kaats. Yeah, the website should be up in the next couple months. And the podcast, if you want to, I have put up an Instagram for that as well. The link is in my other Instagram profile, so you can find it there. But yeah, I'd say Instagram is my home base right now while everything gets resorted.
That's good. You're getting there. I actually said your name like Kaats because I'm so used to from Russia. I'm so used to that speaking. I was like, oh, shoot, I should have asked you.
The thing is, like, and I don't correct people. If someone says cats, I'll correct them. But actually, technically, so my last name is Dutch, and it is pronounced Kaats. That is the correct pronunciation. But whenever it was Americanized and became Kaats, so and I've lived in the Netherlands for a little while, and everyone said Kaats, and I'm just like, I'm not going to correct them because that is the appropriate spell. That is the appropriate pronunciation. So you actually got it like right. I'm saying it wrong, but yeah, I say Kaats. just because saying Kaats just feels like kind of pretentious of me. But yeah, no, I didn't correct you because technically you're right. So congratulations.
You're definitely right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Anya, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and absolutely I love learning from you. I think those are the lessons that every woman will be happy to learn, and maybe not very happy to learn, and they will touch and they'll resonate with so many people, because we do need to stop and pause and think about what's actually going on with us and why. I love this, absolutely love this. I want to put it on the poster, t-shirt. Why are you doing this? Like, why exactly you drink? I'm going to go drink my green juice right now. So I'm going to ask myself this question. Why exactly? What do I want from this right now, right? And it's not only about juice, obviously.
Yeah, just asking yourself, what do you want? I think that is such an important question. So
I think one of my favorites is actually probably would add to that pile is, how do you want to feel?
Yeah.
It's another one that kind of
Totally
grips people. Thank you so much. I absolutely love what you do, and I hope to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.